People born before 1990, what's something you experienced that younger generations will never understand? Story 1. Not knowing how the pictures turned out until they were developed. Calling round to the various landline numbers you had memorized in order to get hold of somebody. Not being instantly reachable at all times. Having no clue what others were up to until they told you. Also grunge. As in the real grunge that was so grunge, almost all the biggest grunge stars eliminate themselves, deliberately or otherwise, once grunge became the mainstream. God, I miss grunge. Story 2. Boredom. I mean, having moments where there is literally nothing to do. It's impossible because I can open my phone and watch, read, whatever. I actually think it's pretty concerning that straight up boredom is gone and can instead be filled up with content. Story 3. How much fun buying music could be. I love the feeling of buying a CD based on cover art and a band name I had maybe heard of before or just sounded cool, and then getting home and listening it. I loved how much fun finding new music from friends passing CDs around to burn. Even with MP3 players that still existed if you didn't buy your music through stores with DRM. Hell, with a Zune, you could transfer music between players with NFC, and that was sick too for the three of us that bought one. Story 4. The competition to be the first to answer when the phone rang. Answering, listening to whom they wanted to talk to, and turning around, looking at Dad just standing there in the middle of the room waiting. Dad, it's for you, big smile. I know, big sigh. It's Paul. I know. Story 5. No wireless stuff. Had a 50-foot phone line so we could all take the phone to our room if we wanted to have a private conversation. Our video game controllers were connected to the game system, and the cord was like 2 feet long, so you were basically a foot away from the TV. My very first cell phone had a cable that plugged into the cigarette lighter in cars. Yes, we used to have cigarette lighters in the dashboard. It literally had to be plugged into work, and each minute cost like 1. Story 6. Realizing that your VCR clock was off by an hour and you recorded 60 minutes accidentally, having to remember to write a monthly check for rent or bills, not calling someone you wanted to talk to because you couldn't afford the long-distance cost, getting on your bike with friends or cousins and disappearing for 5 or 6 hours with no way for your parents to find you, trying to mentally unscramble the scrambled adult movie channels, the cultural phenomena of Star Wars, the unending foreboding of the threat of the Soviet Union, all the way until the mid-'80s. How terrifying and oppressive the thought of nuclear war was, culminating with the films The Day After, 1983, and Threads, 1984, capturing the collective terror and horror we felt. Gas shortages and lines at gas stations. Story 7. We could roam around freely as kids. My parents literally had no clue where I was when I was a kid. After school, I could go to the mall, to the pool, to the park, to a friend, or straight home. Nobody cared, nobody could check, nobody worried as long as I was home before dinner. Story 8. My mom kept her house clean by making us go outside to play. So many forts to build, sticks to find, holes to dig, toxic multicolored streams to play and run off from the local flight line. We had real adventures unsupervised that we could have died from. Story 9. Making plans to meet a friend at a concert or sporting event and not having a way to contact them easily if delayed, lost, there was an emergency, etc. Conversely, showing up at the event and not being able to contact the friend that didn't show up. Story 10. During summer break, lying out in the sun using baby oil and iodine to burn so it turns into a tan. I'm not even kidding. Also, the summers weren't 100 every day. Those super hot days were rare. We didn't even have AC when I was a kid. Inland, Northern Calif, most didn't have anxiety, depression, autism, ADHD, etc. I'm not sure what happened to people's mental health, but I just dislike that kids have to grow up with so much on their plate. I'm so glad I didn't have internet and social media when I was in school. Story 11. Embarrassing but wearing clothes backwards BC crisscross. Teachers laughed so hard at all of us. Also crazy. Still the 90s, if you were on the honor roll, there was a student lounge you could get 20 minutes in. Any snacks were on the honor system and you could turn a dollar bill into quarters that was in the fridge with not a single healthy snack. I kid you not, we had consolidated with another school, so the 3-story middle school had this in the basement. I got to use it in 6th, too naughty and unfocused the other 2 years. Story 12. The fact if you talk to someone that you will meet at some time and place, that was almost sacred thing. There was no chance to let the other one know you will be late 30 minutes. The other kind of unimaginable thing was to let your kid out with friends or whoever without knowing where they are and what they do, without worrying about it. Story 13. I was born in '89 and I remember two things. A time when we didn't have to dial area codes, a time when there was no caller ID whatsoever. You had to just pick up the phone and ask who it was. And nobody had cell phones, so if you wanted to talk to a friend, you had to call their landline. Story 14. Walking home from grade school 1.3 miles on RTUS 5 every day, mostly with sidewalks, in all weathers. No one accosted me or my younger brother for the 7 to 8 years of grade school. I'd walk over a mile to and from local movies. We rob our tweens and teenagers of independence and self-confidence in the name of safety. Story 15. Arguing about stuff without being able to look it up, hunting for dirty magazines, reading magazines, enjoying a bookstore nearly everywhere you go, buying music only from a store, recording music from the radio, riding in an airplane with people smoking, eating in a restaurant with people smoking, drinking in a bar with people smoking, intense paranoia from being caught with or using plant substance, the dignity and behavior of past politicians, the smell of leaded gasoline, sliding around the back seat of a car with leather bench seating on every turn because we didn't have to wear seatbelts, searching for a dime to make a call at a payphone, waiting in line for 1 hour photo processing to pick up your 3x5s, sending a telegram, sending anything. Western Union trading correspondence via handwritten letter. Thank you notes apparently. Dressing fancy on for your airplane flight. Having legroom on airplane flights. Buying a plane ticket that covers 2 checked bags without an additional charge. Actual food on plane flights. Boarding an airplane without being x-rayed or searched. Having any notion of privacy. Dialing a rotary phone Saturday morning cartoons. Not carrying a phone. Not constantly having a camera, being hard to get a hold of, being genuinely lost in a city, blissful ignorance of how bagged sugary cereals are for your health. Story 16. The limited availability of adult content. In the early 80s, you had to figure out a way to either rent, borrow, steal a adult content on VHS or buy, borrow, steal a Playboy Penthouse Dirty Grannies. If you couldn't, you had to make do with the underwear swimwear ads in the Sunday paper or, God forbid, National Geographic. Story 17. If you were meeting friends, especially for a night out, canceling last minute wasn't an option unless it was a real emergency. No mobile phones then to get in touch. So letting your mates down when you'd made a plan wasn't something we'd even think about. Story 18. Dial-up internet, arguing with siblings because they want to call their friends, or arguing with siblings because they wouldn't get off the phone so I could search for totally innocent things online, waiting for a bus with no app and GPS tracking. Will it or will it not arrive? Oh, the mystery. No Uber, 30 to 60-minute waits for a local taxi, the snowy screen on the TV at the end of the day because there was no 247 programming. I could probably keep going. Edit. Phone boxes that require physical cash to use. They keep coming. Story 19. So many. No camera phones recording everything we do. Having to coordinate with friends for where to meet them since no one had phones. Having to go to the mall since online shopping didn't exist. Thomas guides for directions as GPS was non-existent. Having to watch SportsCenter to find out fantasy football scores from the day. Only finding out about new bands by seeing the openers at concerts. Kid-organized games and sports with no hover parents. Story 20. I can think of plenty of technological and social changes over the decades, but nothing that I truly believe younger generations wouldn't or couldn't understand. They may never experience, say, using a rotary phone, but they can certainly understand it, perhaps with a little explanation. I was born after the telegraph went out of use, but I understand how it worked because Grandpa used it daily in his work and explained it to me. Story 21. Entertaining yourself without internet or TV. Parents watched their shows, and there was only one TV. For me, it was books, records, and FM radio. Grandkids watch TV, play video games, scroll TikTok. God forbid the power goes out. My house is full of books of all kinds. Do kids want to look in my library? Think Beast and Belle. Nope, not one page turned. I'm sad about it. Story 22. Peace. No text messages. No anything bugging you. Life seemed hopeful because we didn't have the news in our faces 247. You went to your friends' houses to see them. You didn't know their parents were idiots and of bad character who voted to keep immigrants treated like shoot and to keep the poor from getting health care. Story 23. If you wanted to find information about something, like how fast an elephant is, who was president in 1825, where the liver is located, whatever, you either had to go to the library to look it up, you asked an adult who might know, or you just accepted that you wouldn't know. Story 24. The patience of living in a world with no streaming, no instant anything, Being unplugged from technology, not having the concept of social media growing up, not having every stupid decision of my youth documented for anyone to see, etc. There's a freedom in it and a patience that is learned from all of that, and it's near non-existent these days. Story 25. Born during the 70s, in UE, but I guess it's the same everywhere, we were free to roam around all day without adults looking for us. They didn't care. And at the same time going home and being beaten because dad just can do it. Edit, and I talk as a male. I had to fight a relative with a knife to not let him touch my younger sister. She was 12 and I was 16. The 70s, 80s were tough for children. Every adult asked children to bow and say thank you. Story 26. You would get a prank call from a random person, probably a friend, but my dad worked for the phone company, and I was one of the first to get 69, and I would call them right back, and their parents would answer, and they would get in so much trouble. Haha. I would also get on my bike and ride literally all over town in the middle of the night just for fun. There's no way parents would allow that these days. Story 27. It's doing the rounds right now, so to repeat it, life used to be more colorful, weird, and personal. The wild colors of homes from the 70s, 80s were the norm because people hadn't yet been taught to strongly prioritize the resale value of their assets, cars, homes, etc. Gray, white, black, offend no one. Minimalism is safe. Resale value is maximized at the cost of personal expression. Hopefully Alpha or Z goes in a different direction and you get to see the spaces you live in as more than just assets on your personal balance sheet. Story 28. Hanging up on someone with a loud slam of the telephone receiver? So satisfying. Although I have no idea who I would have been so angry at, but it was fun. Also, I remember my mom smoking cigarettes in the grocery store while I was riding in the cart. Good times. Story 29. One landline phone for an entire household. I still remember how pissed my parents were one time when they went out. I was watching my siblings. I was on the phone with my girlfriend, and my parents had to have the operator do an emergency breakthrough to see if the phone was being used because they kept getting busy signals when they called to check on us. We got a new feature called call waiting after that. You'd hear a beep when someone else was calling when you were on the phone. Before that, if someone was waiting for an important call, the phone was basically off limits. Story 30. I flew from DC to Memphis by myself when I was about 11 or 12. I was the only kid on the plane. The stewardess asked if I wanted to see the cockpit. What kid wouldn't? And she actually walked me to it and introduced me to the pilots. They explained a bunch of the controls and buttons and things. This was early 90s, Northwest Airlines. I think it was a 757. Pretty sure that doesn't happen anymore. Story 31. No social media distractions, and nobody caring where you were unless they wanted to and found you through friends or family, or a message left when you might be somewhere. Payphones available for a quarter or two when you needed to call someone, even long distance. Everything was built to last, and quality and creativity mattered. Story 32. One that feels crazy now is wanting to hear a band or song and just not being able to. Like even in the early years, I didn't have high-speed internet as a young person, and I spent a good bit of time reading about bands that I'd never heard. I remember me and a few friends kicking in and ordering a bunch of CDs from a punk record label from bands we had only heard about. And if they sort of sucked, you had to listen to them a lot anyway, because new music was probably not in the cards for a while. Answer. The flip side of this was hearing something you did love, but having no idea who sang it or how to figure out who sang it. I remember one time in the early 90s turning on Jay Leno and hearing a musical act but having missed their intro. I had no idea who they were and had no way of finding out. Today you can click the program info button and it shows who is on the show, or even use the internet after the fact to see after the fact. Story 33. Creating a mixtape through recording from the radio. Being amazed at the graphics from 4-byte Spectrum games. You agree a time over the phone, then you honor that commitment no matter what. Finding top-shelf mags in the local park. Buying 10 ecstasy pills for 20 notes. Finding a rave in the middle of some waste ground and listening to jungle music till the morning. Story 34. My dad literally had a rack of firearms in the back window of his truck and would always leave his truck unlocked with the keys on the hump when he went somewhere with never a problem. I also drove that truck with its arsenal to school some and parked it alongside the other kids' gun-laden trucks. Nobody born now can possibly comprehend this. Story 35. Having to carry around a box the size of a pager to check your calls on the answering machine. You held the box up to the mouthpiece of the phone, and when your answering machine picked up, you pushed the button on the box, which made a noise, and the machine would start playing your messages. Story 36. The true lack of a total surveillance state and surveillance society. You could walk down a public street and there'd be no record of it. You could just vanish. As kids, our parents expected us to leave the house and not be heard from again till 9 p.m. They had no idea where we were. No one did. If you went missing, you were just gone without a trace. There was absolutely no lasting record of what you and your friends got up to. As adults, it was entirely possible to just change your identity completely and utterly, with few, if any, special skills. Government wouldn't know who the new you was. There was no risk of anyone recognizing you on social media. There was no digital footprint to leave behind a trail. Your only risk of exposure was saving kids from a house fire and having your photograph show up on a national newspaper or TV segment, an oft-used movie trope. Story 37. Playing outside on seemingly endless summer holidays. No mobile tech, the family computer was a Commodore 64 plugged into a telly at home. We were gone for hours and hours at a time on our bikes, perhaps a sandwich, bottle of pop, and a wagon wheel in your backpack. We snuck onto farmland, played in barns and streams, making up our own stories based on Star Wars, Tolkien, ninjas, and TV shows. There was a paper pulp mill which we could cross a river to get into and pinch old comics. We swapped stickers to complete albums and Garbage Pail Kids, and shot at targets with air pistols and catapults. I wouldn't swap my Gen X childhood for any other era. Story 38. Smoking. Smoking was so prevalent. People would smoke on planes, in restaurants, in stores, in school, you name it. Smoking was so ingrained in society that we had to have non-smoking sections rather than smoking sections. And the crazy part about the non-smoking sections in restaurants is that they were often an area of a restaurant as opposed to a separate room. So the non-smokers still got secondhand smoke, just slightly less. Story 39. Not having internet or cell phones. Think how instrumental our phones now are. Now imagine the only cell phone you've ever heard of is the male body part Tracy wrist phone. Now call your friend after your sister gets off the phone. She's off, crap, it's busy. Story 40. Having to know how to spell. You have to have your chores done by a certain time or you can't watch your favorite show. If someone doesn't answer their home phone, then they are unreachable. You didn't know who was calling until they introduced themselves or you recognized their voice. You had to go to the library to look things up, and if you needed a book they didn't have, they might be able to get it through the system. It would be mailed to you in a fancy zipper pouch for free. Story 41. The satisfaction that comes from slamming a phone down on someone. The long jerk twisted phone cord stretched from the kitchen down the hall to the bathroom and having to duck under it or have your sibling pound on the bathroom door while you talk in private. Story 42. With analog TV, every once in a while, atmospheric conditions would carry a signal really far. Normally, the station had to be within 50 to 100 miles with a good antenna. But a few times we turned on the TV and got signal from several states away. Getting Little Rock, Arkansas channels in northern Kansas is one I remember vividly. It was like a weird little parallel reality where it was basically the same programs but different car dealers commercials, and the newscasters were suddenly different people. Once it happened, and some channels were the same channel, and since it was analog, the images were ghostly superimposed over each other. Two discrete but simultaneous broadcasts interleaved together. Story 43. 1. Using an encyclopedia for reports or the card catalog in a library. 2. Recording shows on a VCR. 3. Basically memorizing when shows were on so that we can watch them live, and really the only other time you could re-watch them is when they were reruns. 4. We had a milkman. Story 44. Calling a friend's house to talk with them and having a full conversation with their parents before they would call your friend to the phone. Waiting until 9 p.m. to call or text on our new cell phones while understanding that 10 p.m. was automatically too late for polite phone calls. Story 45. There were these things outside gas stations you could drop a coin in to make a phone call. Kind of like a cell phone, but it was stationary and you had 3 to 5 minutes. To call, not text, I think they were called payphones bonus, setting a blank VHS tape to record at a certain time because you had school the next morning, but really wanted to watch Trigun. Story 46. Just not having answers to questions available immediately. No Google, no Wikipedia, no IMDb. We had encyclopedias. If the answer wasn't there, you had to actually travel to a library, look up the topic in a card catalog, which would tell you where in the building to find particular books. Then you had to find that room, section, and shelf, and hopefully your book would be there. Then you had to skim through the book to try to find the exact fact. Story 47. Happy hour without cell phones, shopping produce seasonally, not wanting selfies, or photos of everything, taking a vacation that wasn't magazine-worthy, driving a car you triangle vent windows, turning on a TV that had a news hour that was literally news not opinion. Story 48. Knocking on somebody's door to let them know you're here to pick them up, and not just texting, calling them from your car. The internet being called a fad that will die off, being totally incommunicado for hours and nobody is worrying. This is not the same as having a dead battery on your phone while every other person around you has a phone, carrying cash basically always, and viewing your credit and later debit card as a reliable form of payment accepted everywhere. Story 49. Being completely separated from school kids once you were home. No social media. You had no idea what other kids were doing or what their bedrooms looked like unless you were friends. If someone called and you didn't call them back, it was no big deal. Maybe you weren't home. Maybe you were grounded from the phone. No one knew what you were doing. Parents and anyone else having no way to reach you when you were out. When we were too young to drive, calling from a payphone when it was time to pick us up, or being at a certain place at a certain time for pickup. Just that whole freedom of not being available all the time, feeling you have to respond. Story 50. A party line for the telephone. It was required in our rural area, not enough lines available. In a similar vein, a rotary phone that was hardwired, no phone jacks, and owned by Mabel. Our TV was a 14 black and white TV, no cable available, 4 channels of broadcast TV only. Well, water with no backup pressure tanks. When the power goes out, no water. We used the outhouse during power outages. Photographs were not frequently taken. Film and developing costs were expensive. Photos were taken mainly on vacations and family reunions. Long-distance phone calls were expensive, about 1 minute for more than 100 miles. On weekends, the cheapest in 1975. Inflation adjusted that 6 minute. Story 51. Getting an actual job at 12 years old, paper route in America. Having relative financial independence at 12, almost no matter where you live in the country, was amazing. Second place is having to make actual decisions when it came to portable music. Especially if you were too young to drive, you got to bring one tape with you. That was usually it. What tape would it be? Because if you got sick of it, you had maybe 2-3 stations on the radio, accounting for tastes. Even being a driver in the early 90s, before car CD took off, you had maybe 20 tapes in the car. And if you didn't have a shotgun rider, finding and changing them while driving wasn't trivial. Story 52. My mother got a 10,000 USD bonus on her 10-year anniversary at work. She was a union factory worker at Zenith in Chicago and got the bonus in 1980. That's about 40,000 today. The money was used to buy a 40K, 1980s money, 3-unit house. Sold the house a few years later for 60K when we moved to a different state. That house and the surrounding neighborhood has been gentrified and upscaled. It's worth $2 million today, according to Zillow. Story 53. We left the doors unlocked at home, except at night. Going to the store, no need to lock up. Next town over? Nah, leave it open. And random neighbors would come by, maybe drop off something on the kitchen table. No worries. I never had a house key because the doors were never locked. Story 54. First thing that comes to mind is the obvious one, life before the internet. When I was in college, I was blown away by the idea of email. It was only available if you worked at or were a student of a university or a research facility. I am still amazed daily by the amount of information available to me on a device that fits into my back pocket. I don't think anyone born in the last 40 years can understand what it was like to have to actually physically go to a library, look through a card catalog that was made up of little cards in wooden drawers, maybe needing to sort it through additional drawers and learn how to use a microfiche. Do you guys even know what a microfiche is? In order to find out about an event that happened just a couple of years ago. That's if you were lucky enough to know how to find the information that you wanted. In order to research something obscure, you might have to first try to figure out what business organization, government department might have access to the information you needed. Then you would have to get in touch with that entity by calling them, writing a letter on paper and putting a stamp on it, or driving there if you were lucky and it was in driving distance. Now I just ask my phone. I have to do a little work to figure out what's a reliable source of information. But that's it. That's all the effort that's involved. It's crazy to me how often people are fighting tooth and nail over facts that are that easy to discover and document. Story 55. How big of a pain keeping track of your checking account balance was in the days before direct deposit, debit cards, online pay, and auto pay was. Just got paid? You'll need to personally go to the physical bank during business hours to deposit that cash and/or check. Need some cash? You'll need to go to the bank during business hours, fill out a paper form, and the bank teller will count out your cash and hand it to you. Maybe you have an ATM card, which means you can go to the bank after they're closed and withdraw money. There are no ATM networks. You can only use the ATM at your actual bank. Bought something or paid somebody back for something with a check? They might deposit the check today, or they might deposit it 3 months from now. The transaction won't post to your bank until then. And you probably write at least a couple dozen checks a month because debit cards aren't a thing yet. Checking your balance or reviewing transactions? Your bank will send you a paper statement in the mail once a month listing all deposits, cash checks, and the balance. Checks you wrote that haven't been cashed yet aren't included. So you have to go over the full list to figure out what your actual balance will be after everyone finally deposits their checks. If you overdraft because you didn't track your balance correctly, the bank sends the check back to whoever you paid, charges them a fee, and then they have to contact you and get you to repay them. They do not like this. Businesses may ban you from paying by check, cash only, if it happens. Need to check your balance more than once a month? Go back to the bank during business hours and talk to the bank teller. Utilities and other bills. Companies will send you a paper bill each month. You have to open them, write a check, and mail it to them before the due date. Shoot, you ran out of stamps. Now you have to go to the post office during business hours to get more. Bought a bunch of stamps all at once? The price of stamps just went up 2 cents, and forever stamps aren't a thing yet. You'll either need to use 2 stamps and pay almost double per letter, or go back to the post office and buy a bunch of 1 and 2 cent stamps. The electric company just charged you a late fee because this took too long. Direct deposit, online banking, auto pay, and debit cards are really pretty awesome. Story 56. Sometimes you just weren't able to know things that you can always know in 2025. Like movie times, if you didn't have a newspaper or access to a telephone or the telephone number to a place, you needed a phone book to find that out. And sports, there was no way you'd know who had the 14th most hits in the history of baseball. Story 57. Lifting a phone receiver off the cradle, dialing 0 by putting your finger in the hole over the 0, then rotating it forcefully clockwise as you felt and heard the sound, then having a real live person say, "Operator, how can I help you?" Edited typo. Story 58. You would have a question about something. Where did the scientific classification of life come from? How fast is the speed of light? Are dogs and wolves related? And you couldn't just Google it on your phone or computer. You had to hold the question in the back of your head until you found a person who could answer, or an encyclopedia or library. I really wonder what this means for humanity and our ability to conceive and synthesize information. Answer: I think it is a possibly bigger problem in being able to conceive and synthesize questions. I recall trying to think up good things to wonder about, then wait to explore as information or someone with knowledge became available. When all the answers are only a tap away, people forget to even ask questions or wonder. What's worse is that increasingly many people think that because they could know, they already do. Then all questioning ceases as they already know everything because they could. It explains a lot for the increase in polarization. I distinctly remember people being a lot less sure of themselves. Story 59. Stumbling into the back room of the video store, the distinct feel of dropping a needle on a record, breaking into your own house because you forgot your key, again, coloring on wide format printer paper that Dad would bring home from work, and pulling off serrated edges of printer paper, and the paper would get everywhere like party streamers. Story 60. Being invited to a house party that hosts Battle of the Bands and everyone going nuts when they play, especially when you know them or are friends them. Seeing a guy get on tall speakers and jumping into the crowd to surf, hanging out with all your friends and running around with them. All of this while in high school, the energy is indescribable. Story 61. Using a city atlas to get around a major city, memorizing addresses of many random places so that you know where something is on that street relative to your memorized landmark. Writing down the phone number of the place you're going in case you get lost and have to call for directions, or in case it takes longer than expected for you to find the place. Carrying change for payphones so that you can make those calls. Carrying a phone book in your car at all times. You can find addresses with them of places you know, or you can use the yellow pages to find, say, the nearest Mexican restaurant or auto mechanic when you're out driving around. Having a compass on your dash so that if all else fails, you still know which direction you're going. More useful on trips outside your city, but can still be helpful at times. Knowing that cops or firefighters always know the area. Being able to pick up a local map from a gas station if you're in a strange town. All those moments will be lost in time like tears in rain. Story 62. 8-track, cars without AC but with ashtrays, rotary phones, life before a computer or cell phone, using an encyclopedia, having to go to the library for research papers and using the Dewey Decimal System, actually writing a letter to someone in cursive and mailing it. Story 63. Unanswered questions. If it wasn't covered in the 4 paragraphs Britannica had on the topic, you were shoot out of luck. It led to this great phenomenon where you'd meet somebody with a cool palm and you'd finally get to ask that question you've been wondering for so long. I miss that. Answer. I was just having a conversation with my older kids about this and had to explain why the older generation believed old wives' tales that seemed silly to them, like peeing on a jellyfish sting. I was raised on a 72-acre farm and had always been told that tomato juice would neutralize skunk spray odor. A couple of them had heard of that too, so I asked them to look it up. Turns out skunk spray is not neutralized by tomato juice at all. I told them to imagine no one ever knowing, except for scientists who didn't have access to worldwide internet to dispel the myths, and not having Google to magically tell you the answer. Edit autocorrect. I'm not trying to talk about old wives' butts. That's a whole different tale to tell about tales. Story 64. Being disconnected. No internet, no cell phone. If you walked outside the house, pretty much no phone, but also a sense of being connected. Fewer outlets, no internet, fewer television channels meant more people watching the same thing at the same time and having a shared experience. Now we all have our own bubbles and watch things on demand. Story 65. I didn't read everything, so it might have been said, but having to wait for the radio to play songs and learn new artists' albums you were into. I was born in '78 and lived in the country where we didn't get cable until I was 16, so I didn't even have MTV, Total Request, and whatnot, except when at other people's houses. Story 66. Smaller independent stores that were owned and run by local people. A sense that where you lived and shopped mattered because you were directly contributing to the local fabric. You knew the people at the fruit store, at the electronics store, at the delicatessen, the gas station. Nowadays, it has all been corporatized and conglomerated, and the people working the counters seem to be exploited temporary foreign workers. It is sad and a real loss of community. Story 67. Being left outside to wander in the brush with my pack of dogs. No latchkey allowed. I might get in trouble in the house. Being out with the rattlers and tarantulas was okay, though. Helping Dad replace the tubes in the TV, the electronic kit of the month building oscillators and radios on my desk. Famous monsters of filmland. Being gone for hours on my bike, told just be back by dark. A dime for the payphone just in case. Story 68. Going a bit further back than most of the youngster posting, the invention of the video game. The effects on people that we later found out were from lead in the gasoline. The slow fade of the manual transmission, still somewhat going on, hiding under desks to practice being nuked. I'd say the active shooter drills kids have to go through today are worse, especially because the terrifying event actually happens daily. Parachute day in gym class, walking uphill both ways in snowstorms and tornadoes while fighting your way through raiders and pirates. I had a 1-mile walk to and from school for my whole childhood, regardless of weather. Some years I could take my bike, some I couldn't. Like many have said, leaving the house after breakfast and returning for lunch, then leaving until the streetlights came on. I generally told my mom where I was going, and if I could, would call and tell her if I went somewhere else. I started this pattern when I was 5 or so because we lived 100 yards from a park, and I spent most of my time there. The slow adoption of seatbelts and baby seats. I once caught myself on the inside door handle when the door popped open while we were going over a railroad track and had to pull myself back in because there was traffic behind us. Pocket calculators became available if you had enough money in early high school. I saved up almost a month's pay to get one and used it for a decade. As others have pointed out, the invention of the VCR. We finally got one because Mom unknowingly bought a hot one from a house thief when I was a junior or senior in high school. Then creation of MTV. It was so amazingly good for the first decade or so. Y'all just can't imagine what a huge thing that was. We never had cable, so I had to watch it at friends' houses. Technology was changing so amazing fast back then, and in such huge ways. Went from never having really heard of a computer to having an extremely basic one when I was 18. No hard drive, no disk drive, no monitor, no mouse, etc., using an audio cassette for what little storage it had. Darn, I'm old. Story 69. 1. How colorful the world was. Marketing people used wild colors. Everything was just colorful. You only see this at Disney World now. 2. How often you had to speak to strangers. Excuse me, would you have a dime for the payphone? Excuse me, can you break $1? Excuse me, where is so-and-so place? Story 70. Being able to rent a video game and/or console for a week to get a feel for it before deciding to buy it. Game demos are not even close to being the same thing. In elementary school, playing Oregon Trail on the singular school computer. Then, in junior high, taking the optional Info Pro class to learn about computers and how to use Microsoft Office and the wonders of electronic mail. Having pen pals. Story 71. Genuinely thinking tomorrow will be better than today. Growing up, there was an explosive innovation in technologies. And of course, the internet in the 90s was a thing to behold. I was bombarded with messages of environmentalism and recycling. And global warming was a thing that was presented as a problem people were working to solve. Adults told us we could do anything we wanted to. And getting a college degree would let you do what you love for the rest of your life. In the 90s, I truly was excited for what the future would bring. Story 72. Having to wait for things. There's nothing more disappointing than downloading a song off Napster, only to wake up the next day to see it's at 9 but couldn't finish downloading. Or when you're almost there with a bunch of downloads and someone picks up the phone. Those things were enough to throw anyone into a rage. Story 73. How much paper material there was. Magazines, newspapers, newsletters, pamphlets, menus, coupons, vouchers, receipts, manuals, recipes, instructions, photos, lists, homework, address book, messages, tickets. It was all physical paper products that occupied space in our home scars bags. Story 74. Centralized pop culture. We were all watching the same episodes of the same shows at the same time and listening to the same music. We had a pretty good chance of finding some common ground with anyone we talked to. Now it's possible for a person's entire news, music, entertainment catalog to be so niche you've never even heard of them. Everything was in person unless you did catalogs. No online shopping, grocery delivery, online dating. You had to go out into your community and find whatever it was you were looking for, and it was likely you'd run into people you know while you were out. Story 75. Being 8 years old and leaving your house at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturday and running around the neighborhood with your friends all day. Not an adult in sight. Then about 5 p.m. you start hearing moms yelling kids' names across the neighborhood to come home to eat dinner. It was amazing to have that freedom. Story 76. Asking a girl you liked for her phone number, then spending the whole afternoon and evening getting your courage up to call her when you want to talk to her, only to have her dad answer the phone because it's the early 2000s and the number she gave you is the family landline number. Story 77. We didn't have a TV until my dad rented one for a week to watch the news and funeral when JFK was assassinated. We didn't get one of our own until a few years later. Local news came on at 5 a.m. to get the day started. We only had 2 channels, and to change the channel meant going outside to turn the antenna. Story 78. Book mobiles. It's the only way I could get books and to read in my rural area when I was a kid. I was allowed to check out 2 grocery bags, which were actual paper, full every few weeks. The mobile was an RV fitted with shelves with hundreds of books in them. Story 79. The phone being attached to the wall by a cord and only being able to facilitate voice. No texting, videos, apps. The internet was not in widespread use and wasn't very useful yet for most people. Even if you had it, off you did. You normally had to disconnect the phone and deal with missed calls while using the internet because most people did not have 2 phone lines. If you had the internet, everybody came to your house to use it as a novelty. People just dealt with not having the answers to most questions they had because you couldn't just Google it. Unsolicited pop-bys by friends were fairly common if you lived close or friends were in the area because calling ahead was in these cases often more cumbersome than just knocking on the door, and people enjoyed the surprise much of the time, at least I did. Going out in groups meant if the group wanted to split up, you had to make concrete plans to meet at a particular spot at a particular time to avoid losing people because there were no mobile phones. If friends, family went out, there was no good way to check in or check up with them while they were out. Again, no phones, so you just had to deal with not knowing, and people were okay with this. I remember because there was less technology, I was much more tuned into my environment. I was more aware of cars going by, birds chirping, the wind changing quality, and the air smelling different as a storm approached, subtle shifts and creaks in the house, etc. Because my mind was less occupied and therefore more of my attention was free, and that naturally led to increased awareness. And this made me feel more intimately connected to my environment and to nature. Story 80. Not having to worry about being recorded and tracked. There were no cell phones, no digital cameras, no ring cams. Cars didn't have cameras. Limited surveillance cameras. If someone wanted to record you, it was with a bulky camera, and it was pretty obvious. Story 81. Not having the internet, running to the restroom during commercial breaks, commercials that were awesome, buying cigarettes at 12 for double the price from the cool Indian guy at the gas station, payphones, collect calls, waiting all week for an episode of your favorite show, 70 video games when that was more than a full day's pay for a lot of people, having to go to the library to research anything, 49 burritos and tacos that actually tasted good. Big Mac meal was one on the menu and was $2.99. Serial killer scares. Movies that were huge back then were huge. People would see the same movie multiple times in the theater. I know a drive-in in Tennessee that showed Jurassic Park for 3 years straight. Story 82. This is my hilarious tidbit. So Goof Troop, a Disney animation sitcom that predated and led up to a Goofy movie, was released around 1992 or 93. I saw all the promos and was stoked as a kid. The only thing was that I didn't know when the first episode was airing, so I pulled out the TV guide. If you know how those work, then you know that you basically are searching the day of in a little booklet that your mom got in the mail and scanning the literal pages. Well, I found F Troop and was like, that has to be it. But why is it on at like 5:30 a.m.? Oh, well, don't tell Mom. Just set my alarm early. So I get up super early and brush my teeth, comb my hair, run downstairs, throw an Eggo waffle in and find the clicker. Tune in to Channel 45 and lo and behold, some black and white show comes on. F Troop. Turns out it was a show resyndicated from the 60s. Oh my God, I was so mad. Bad day at school that day. Story 83. The absolute excitement for Friday nights and going to the movie rental store to rent some movies with a friends or girlfriend and being excited to see the new release section. God, I miss that. The whole feeling of excitement and joy to get settled in, and everyone finally has gotten their seats on the couch, their popcorn, and you toss that VHS tape in and hear the click. You knew you had it made for the next few hours. Story 84. Ashtrays next to hospital beds. Everyone smoked. My dad had brain cancer in the 70s, 80s. I have photos of us, my dad's head wrap from surgery, and a cig in each of my parents' hands. The doctor always shared a smoke with my dad when he did his rounds. Story 85. The endless pining for more Dragon Ball content after it left the WB. Zoomers don't even know DB and DBZ came to the States on the WB. It's two before their time. So is dial-up internet where you couldn't stream, and an age where anime was so niche you could get beaten up over liking it. Hell, so is a time where teachers saw bullying and did nothing about it, lol. We needed Goku on Toonami after school because we were actually dealing with stuff at school, not just cyberbullying, lol. I surfed the internet for hours going to DBZ websites to look at pictures of SSJ Future Trunks and having no idea what he looked like in motion or what he sounded like or that fusions had two voices at once. Just pictures. This is why the younger generations are burnt out. Everything is instant gratification now. No waiting, no pining, no wondering. Just click, click, boom. Story 86. Not being able to immediately look up the answer to any question, it was normal to just wonder about things, or debate it with your friends, or wait till you could look in a book. Everyone in the extended family used to call my brother if they had a factual question about movies, who starred in what, which film won Best Picture 10 years ago, etc., because he had an encyclopedic memory when it came to Hollywood. Now that knowledge is basically useless. Story 87. Designing my entire week around the television, from Star Trek and Space 1999 reruns after church on Sundays to The Incredible Hulk on Thursday nights, to Saturday morning cartoons, to Tarzan Theater on Channel 4 in Indianapolis every Saturday late night. Story 88. The frustration of not being able to find out anything about software development techniques and any other thing you want to learn about without digging into books or buying a bunch of computer magazines and then having to figure out all the errors in the published code to make it actually work. Well, it was a learning experience, but now you can just post a question on a relevant forum and usually have some good answers within a few hours, or even find the answer directly with a few Google searches to narrow things down. Story 89. I told someone once that my mom was fired for wearing a pantsuit to her classroom, back when she was a teacher. They never believe me and want to argue the point with me. I usually just add that I was sent home from school years later because on a very cold day when I had to walk to class, I just kept my snow pants on. I had on a dress and tights but was shivering because the rooms there were kept so cold. The teacher told me to take them off and I said, no, I can't do that yet. I'm still freezing. I was sent into the hallway, then to the principal's office, and then home for the rest of the day. I am girls and women cannot wear pants in public schools. Years old. Answer. Clearing out boxes of old school papers last year, my mom saved everything. I came across a letter to parents from the elderly maiden lady who was my elementary school principal from first through third grades. Letter announced that school dress code was being changed to allow girls to wear slacks to school, but only between Thanksgiving and Easter break. Also, shorts would be permitted from the 1st of May till the end of school in mid-June, but for boys only, not for girls. And dungarees were not allowed for either intimacy at any time. This would have been for the 1970-1971 school year. I was in second grade. Story 90. Having to take a little address book with you everywhere so you could keep track of your important phone numbers. Being excited to get a princess phone where you could press the number buttons instead of using a rotary dial. Going on a trip and not having to go through security to get on a plane. Story 91. Sitting in a closet for privacy with the phone cord stretched across 2 rooms. Related, having to talk to someone's parents. May I talk to Amy, please? Bonus, I lived on a farm in middle school and we shared our phone line with 2 other houses. Party line. I knew all the tea about my older teenage neighbor. Good currency. Story 92. Riding your bikes all over the neighborhood just to get out of the house, or riding your bike all over the neighborhood just to find your friends because all their bikes were in the front yard, or the fact your parents didn't get a shoot where you were. As long as you were home for dinner or when the street lights came on to get a shower and make sure your homework was done. Story 93. Man, people not even giving deep answers, just the same old stupid answers. You want a good one? The younger generation will never understand being alone. Everybody has access to social media, technology, news, events, etc. You literally have to go out of your way to cut yourself off. The younger generation will have the alone while not being alone feeling, but it's not the same. You see those memes about wanting to live alone in a cabin in the woods cut off from the internet. That was literally every child after they came home from school or came in after dark. You had TV, assuming somebody wasn't watching it. Beyond that, you were cut off. No talking to friends, no checking news and events, just you and family alone. Go into your room? I'm alone. The younger generation will never know that feeling because they can just turn on at any moment. Story 94. Having to call a house phone and speak to a friend's parents to get your friend on the phone. Using street lamps as a clock for when you needed to be home. Getting made fun of because you use the internet. Getting disconnected from the internet because someone picked up the house phone. Story 95. Dialing 555-1212 for information, and if you lived in California, dialing popcorn for the time and date. I am also old enough to remember my grandmother had a party line. Several homes had the same phone number. You had to lift the handle and listen to see if anyone was using the phone. Story 96. The freedom to learn proper risk assessment. Gen X was the last generation allowed to learn from their own mistakes. A parent's job is to prepare their children for the world, not to protect them from it. Privacy. I can't believe we allowed corporations to spy on us and collect our data. Surveillance capitalism and social media have taken away our privacy. With everything out in the open, we've also lost our shame. This is why you see so much shameless behavior today. Being unreachable. Traveling before the internet was an adventure. You were just gone, independent and free. A phone call here and there to check in, but that's it. That type of traveling used to be a part of becoming an adult. Story 97. In the U.S., watching most of the same shows and films and listening to most of the same albums and having a fairly shared culture with some niche offerings and some divisions along cultural lines, i.e., you probably weren't as aware of erasure in this mortal coil if you were straight pre-1990, LOL. I see adults my age, 55, comment who on posts about Bad Bunny or Chappelle Roan, but my 55-year-old mom totally knew who Tori Amos and Giannis were in the 90s. Story 98. Born in 85, I lived in AZ in the mid-90s. I used to walk out the door in a pair of jeans, go into the desert, and not come home until close to dark. I got stalked by a big cat, had a cactus needle go through my thumb, found a car riddled with bullet holes and what I would later learn were 22 LR shell casings, climbed one of the 2 mountains a mile away all alone or with my friends, no adults. By the early 2000s, I lived in IL. I'd ride my bike with some friends out of the neighborhood to the local DQ, get ice cream, explore the abandoned house in the area, go to the mall, see a movie, whatever. The world started changing around then. I remember feeling like I had less freedom at 16 than I had at 10. My mom started making me check in everywhere I went. She wanted to meet and get to know all my friends. Everything felt more paranoid. Nowadays, almost all free spaces for kids to go and then hang out don't exist. That's sad. Edit, ice cream, not crime lol. Story 99. Having to remember the various random questions that popped into my head long enough to write them down. Then when I got to go to the library looking up the answers in actual encyclopedias. The fact that we have access to all of the knowledge of the human race at our fingertips and 13 of people refuse to engage with it infuriates me. Story 100. Freedom. The feeling of the wind through your hair as you rode your bike with no hands and no helmet. The sound of a rotary phone, not to mention the weight. Laying in the back of a truck, watching the stars while Dad drives us home from the drive-in movies. The sheer size of the first mobile phone. Story 101. Kinda just freedom. Freedom to get lost. I was just discussing this with another parent. My folks rarely knew where I was if I wasn't home. Long bike rides for hours. Stay after school and they didn't know where I was. I'd be downtown Chicago for long stretches doing nothing particular. Parents worked. Sisters would have daytime parties at times. MWFH. Now the kids can't get anything past me. No cell phones or pagers. Just come home when you feel like it. That wasn't consequence-free at home, but they couldn't force me to come home, Memorizing phone numbers. I remember the big change in Chicago, where we had to use area code 708 for the burbs now, a shared single phone. Sisters would take the corded phone and stretch it into another room for a hint of privacy. Appointment TV. Want to watch something? You're in front of the TV at a specific time. Though I was one of the few that could program a VCR, adjusting rabbit ear antennas, separate VHF and UHF dials, having to balance someone wants the TV with gaming computer time, central TV versus everyone has a screen, music, 45 singles. If I wanted to play it, again the central record player. Hope you find music you like on the radio. Lots of tapes making mixtapes or taping off the radio. Spending minutes trying to fine-tune the station to get minimal static. Fixing cassette tapes from various flaws. The first Walkman I had, wow, what a revelation. Music can be personal. Wow. Hearing rap music for the first time. Then grunge. I can't think of a new genre that was really invented recently. Something wow. I'm heating something new. Appointment radio. B96 had dance blocks at night. No podcast to download later. You had to be at the radio at the time. Big boat cars with big V8 engines. I have a Impreza and I like the size. Hard-learned skills for driving big rear-wheel drive cars in the snow on bias ply tires with no ABS or traction control. A bit later, coordinating with someone with pagers. Hey, I need to get to a payphone. Having a few quarters around just in case. I crashed a party at my sister's house that way. Random cameras, many with shoot film. 110 Kodak disc. Man, were those pics grainy. Various flash cubes or whatever. Polaroid instant, shake it like a Polaroid. Most of the cheap cameras were rangefinders. What you saw in the viewfinder was not what the lens saw. Would your finger be a big chunk of the pic? You won't know until it's developed. I remember picking up a stack of photos, and unknown to me, my GF took a pic of my jerk naked in the shower. I'm sure the photo staff liked that one. We had an 8mm film camera for any home movie taking. Dad mucking around with the projector to get it to go. All the back and forth had do this is all the toys falling upward into the box. This is the dog walking backwards. Drinking culture was very different. My dad would bring 8 Iomi to the bar. He'd have his beer and sometimes whiskey, and hey, drive home buzzed with your kid. No problem. One thing that is better, a lot of pain then was just hidden. I think having it out and talked about now is better. The internet. The early net was an Easter egg hunt. You had to know where to look. Then the web as well. There was so much optimism on how this was going to change things. Small vendors would beat big ones. Everyone would talk and conflict would disappear. I think what can't be captured in this list is the feeling. From about 91 to early 2000, there was an optimism. We beat the Soviet Union. We don't need to be scared. We'll have a peace dividend. We won the Gulf War. The internet will connect people and everyone will be happy. We solved everything we can, even deregulate banking. Money is solved. Global warming awareness wasn't mainstream yet. Just all good things. Also, as a Chicagoan, Jordan won 6 titles. Then the dot-com crash, 9/11. That deregulation made the banks wobble global recession. Pandemic eliminate millions. The realization that everyone has a personalized propaganda stream in their pocket. I wish I could go back to the 90s. I'd miss my kids, though. Story 102. The amount of time I spent on the phone talking to my friends. We would even call each other and just sit in silence while one of us did something else sometimes. I would never do that now. The thought of actually talking on my phone to anybody makes me recoil. I do it when I have to, and not a second more. I can imagine the younger generations cannot picture enjoying spending hours actually talking on the phone to another person. I can barely believe I used to enjoy it myself, LOL.